Gresham College presents Olympism, Fair Play by Dr. Jim Parry, the University of Leeds.
Let's just start off with recapping some of the things that I've said in the past couple of lectures very, very quickly. First of all, Olympism, what's that? It's about not just the elite athlete, but everybody. Not just this short truce period of the Olympic Games, but the whole of life. Not just competition and winning, but also the values of participation and cooperation. Not just sport as an activity, but also sport as an educational, formative, developmental influence. So Olympism is this universal social philosophy, sees itself as a universal social philosophy which emphasises the role of sport in world development, international understanding, peaceful coexistence, social and moral education. Now, this is a hell of a set of claims. It's a big programme, isn't it? It's about moral education in schools. It's about peace and the United Nations. It's a huge programme. And according to de Coubertin, the reviver of the modern games, this philosophy underpins the whole of Olympic sport. It's not just, he insists upon this, it's not just a world championships. What makes the Olympics unique is not just that it's a multi-sport set of world championships all going on at the same time. It's not just that. What makes it unique is the philosophy that underlies it. And this is based on what we might rather grandly see as a philosophical anthropology, an idealized conception of the human being that stresses these things. It's about individual all-round development towards excellence through effort, under conditions of mutual respect, fairness, justice, equality, view to creating lasting friendships, international relations of peace, cultural alliances with the arts. This is a massive programme. An ambitious set of claims, but this is what we're considering this evening. Underlying this, of course, is some conception of sport, and so very briefly, we in the first lecture, we identified a concept of sport. Call it Olympic sport to differentiate it from other kinds of sport, if you like. We're talking about serious competitive sport. It's physical, it's a contest. Competitive sport, it's rule-governed, it's institutionalised, and in order to engage in it, we have to share values and commitments. And this brings with it a set of values. If something's a physical enterprise, you can't be successful in it without effort. So you have to value effort. You have to value excellence if it's competitive. You have to value fair play, equality and justice if it's rule-governed, and so on. So in specifying a concept of sport, we also specify a range of values. That's the idea. And so this range of values coheres with the political philosophy of liberalism. De Coubertin being a product of late 19th century European liberalism. And so you get these very generally specified set of political and ethical values. Fairness, equality, respect for others, rule adherence, contract keeping. There are a few more: democracy, responsibility, accountability. You can go on, a range of liberal values specified at a very high level of generality so that each culture can plug into it a set of thick values of their own. So democracy, for example, is a different thing in Iceland from what it is in Switzerland, from what it is in Britain. Democracy is one thing, and at the same time it's many things. It's one thing when specified very, very, very generally. And it's many different things when specified particularly, in particularity. Okay, so this is the big benefit of a universal philosophy. It says it applies to everybody. Well, that looks daft, doesn't it? 205 or 206 countries in the world, and you've got something that applies to everybody? That's a bit strange, isn't it? No, says liberal theory. There are thin value structures that apply to all of us. You couldn't have the United Nations without it. You couldn't have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights without this idea of values that apply to all of us just because we're humans. Now, the idea is sport has that as well. Why is sport universal? Why does everybody play football? It's because the values are specified at a very thin level at the top. There are these rules and we all have to abide by just these rules. But there are lots of things about football that aren't rule specified. So Brazilian football's different from Italian football, from British football, from German football, from Spanish football. It's culturally specific, but acknowledges that there are these universal general rules that apply to everybody. So, my line tonight goes something like, yes, there's this vast range of values, there's this huge programme of social, political and ethical development, but it's all premised on the major idea in the ethics of sport, and that is fair play. So my line this evening is going to be something like this. The essence of Olympic sport is ethical competition. It's not just any old sport that can fulfil this ethical requirement. For example, some professional sport values spectacle over and above human development. When my sons were aged 11 or 12 or 13, I can't remember, I took them to Newcastle to see WWF SmackDown. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's professional wrestling. And they loved it. It was on the TV and they wanted to go and see all these huge guys wrestling. And I was sceptical about it. I said, look, it's not really sport, this. It's all rehearsed and they know who the winners are going to be before they start. And it's a soap opera, really. It looks like sport, but it's not. Right. WWF SmackDown will not work as moral education. It just can't cut it. Canadian ice hockey, half the crowd go along to see somebody getting their face smashed in, or see somebody get carried off because they've had the wrong end of a stick in the ribs. Right? People go there for that kind of sensationalism. And the question is, does that kind of emphasis on sport prejudice the possible ethical aims of sport? And de Coubertin would say yes. I mean, I haven't got time to go into it now, but he said fair or temple. By fair, he meant market. Marketplace or temple. Your sport can be of one of these two kinds. It can't be both. You've got to decide. Do you want sport as temple with intrinsic ethical values at its heart? Or do you want sport as marketplace? Now, again, my line goes, 98% of sport is fair. 98% of sport in Great Britain is played not professionally. It's people out in parks. Why are they doing it? To make money, to get glory? No, they're out there because they love sport. They're out there to enjoy the intrinsic values of sport. So it's just 2% of sport that's professional. And we worry about that because we worry about the effect of professional attitudes to sport upon school children and so on. So, and that's where de Coubertin's coming from. So, Olympism is about ethical sport as an educational influence. And the basis of all of this is fair play. So the question is, what's fair play? Now, usually, this is the sort of stuff that people say fair play is. First of all, a virtue. The virtue of rule adherence. Stick to the rules, that's fair play. If you break the rules, not fair. So that's one conception of fair play. Second conception, it's a bit more than that. It's not just abiding by the rules, because you can abide by the rules, by the letter of the rules, and be a bit of a twit. You can be a person who's trying to use gamesmanship or undermine the opposition in various ways. So it's not just rule adherence. This second view of fair play says there's a kind of spirit of sport that we want to call fair play, which encourages people to supererogatory actions. Supererogatory actions are those that we do over and above the call of duty. It's our duty to obey the rules. Supererogation is doing good things over and above our duty to obey the rules. So, for example, I think it was 72 when we won the gold in the bob, in the two-man bob, or was it the four-man bob? I don't know, can't remember the details. If anybody's got the history, let me know. In the Winter Olympics. Now, Winter Olympic gold medals in the last 40 or 50 years for us, I think you can probably count on the fingers of one hand. And we got one in 72. How did we get it? Well, we were lying third after the first run, behind the Austrians who were first. And we had a problem with our bob. One of the runners had come off and got damaged. And so we couldn't make a second run. And we were in danger of losing even the bronze. When the Austrians found out, they took a runner from their sled and offered it to the British. The British clipped on this runner and won the gold, pushing the Austrians down into second. Now, the Austrians didn't have to do that, did they? They might have thought, those British look quite good, even though they're third after the first run. Oh, their bob's broken down, what a pity. There's no rule that says if somebody's bob breaks down, you've got to help them out. No, it's supererogatory. And they did it. That's fair play. The Austrians took this kind of view. We want to beat the British, we want to beat the Germans, we want to beat everybody, right? But we want to beat them in bobsleighing. It's no honour to beat somebody who can't participate. I don't want to win like that. I want to beat everybody fairly and squarely. And for me, that's a tremendous attitude to have towards your sport. Look how many games in the Premiership are won by 5, 6 or 7 goals. Not many. But nearly all of them involve a sending off. So if you beat somebody 5-1, but they only had 10 men, it's not really a 5-1 thrashing, is it? Right? So the idea is, if you want the best sport, the really good sport, fair play means supererogation. We're striving for the best contest because we want to be the best and show we're the best. You can't show you're the best if you beat somebody when they're not at their best. So that's the second view of fair play. The third view is even more general than that. It's the having of a general attitude towards sport or a general attitude towards life itself, which involves respect for others, modesty in victory, serenity in defeat, and generosity towards others. So we think of some people as embodying fair play. Bobby Charlton never got sent off, never had his name taken, never did a dirty tackle in his life. Right? And yet, a world-class player. Everybody recognises him as a world-class player of his generation. And so he's remembered as not just a great footballer, but a person of honour and a person of integrity and a person of fair play. Now, we don't kind of have a word for this, I don't think. If anybody can think of one, let me know. But the French do. The French have taken over the words fair play, and they've made one word out of them. They call it le fair play. But they also say, they have a way of saying, which you can't say in English, il est fair play, meaning he is that kind of person. And this third conception reflects that idea. And finally, fair play can be seen, especially by physical educators in schools, as a behavioural ideal for moral education. So when you're out with your kids on the playing field, and not just PE teachers, but coaches of all kinds, obviously, you have this idea in your mind of the kind of attitudes you want your kids to have towards their sport. And that kind of idea drives you towards encouraging the kids to play in a certain way and to become a certain kind of person. So that's what people normally think about when they think about fair play. I think it's much more serious than that. I see fair play in its most important manifestation as the very logic of sport. That's to say, for me, the primary nature of fair play in sport is not just a requirement to be virtuous, not just an exhortation to behave well, not a kind of worldview, a Weltanschauung, not just an educational tool. For me, it's a logically necessary feature of successful engagement in the contest. That's to say, I think you can't have sport at all without fair play. Because if you don't have equality before the rules and all the other things that are required by fair play, you can't possibly engage in the sporting contest. Maybe that's not an easy idea to take on board in one bite. So think about a traffic system. In England we drive on the left. Some other places they drive on the right. It doesn't matter, right? What does matter, though, is that you decide what you want to do, right? So what matters is that you have a rule. We drive on the left. Now, if you didn't have a rule, And because we drive on the left and because we have that rule, we have a traffic system. That's the basis of our traffic system. All our road signs, all our roundabouts, and so on, they're all designed because we have a you must drive on the left traffic system. Okay. In other countries, the traffic system is different, but they've got to have rules as well. Because if they didn't have some rules, it wouldn't be a traffic system, would it? You know, if anybody could drive anywhere they wanted, you know, like in Paris, you know, he can drive on the right, he can drive on the left, he can come across this way, he can go across that way. It would be absolute chaos. There would be no traffic system. So the point is, you can't have your traffic system unless you have your rules. Same thing with sport. If you don't have rules, anybody been to see any Shrovetide football? I'm from Derby, and we used to go up to Ashbourne on Shrove Tuesday for the Shrovetide medieval football celebrations. The game lasts from dawn till dusk. You have to be born north of the river or south of the river, the upwards versus the downwards, to participate. But that doesn't stop other people from participating. The goals are 1.5 miles apart. And you have to ground the ball at this place or this place, and there aren't any rules. Is it sport? Of course it's not. They call it Shrovetide football, but it's Shrovetide fighting. That's all it is. It's just a scrum and a scramble. And there are no things to do wrong. You can stuff it up your jumper. You can hide it in a dustbin for 3 hours till they all get fed up looking for it, and then you run off with it. You can do anything you want, right? It's not sport then, is it? In order for it to be sport, you have to have rules that are common rules between both sides and which are addressed equally and fairly. The reason why you have to have that for sport is, if the rules aren't the same for both sides, nobody can win. You can only win against somebody if they're doing the same thing as you. If you're doing one thing and they're doing another thing, there's not a contest between you. The contest is, are you better at this thing or am I better at this thing? There has to be a thing for us to contest over. So the point is, the rule basis, the rule adherence idea of fair play, the rule basis of sport is the very logical basis of sport. It's not just you're supposed to be a nice person or you're supposed to have a particular attitude towards life. No, it's much more serious than that. You can't have sport without this idea of fair play. So, what follows from this? Well, what follows from this is, you don't have to join. Right? You don't have to drive a car. You can go and live in the countryside. You can go and live on, is it Alderney? I don't know. One of the Channel Islands doesn't have any roads, right? It doesn't allow cars. There are no cars there. Go and live there. You don't have to bother with the traffic system, right? And you don't have to play sport. So don't bother. You know, you don't have to. But if you freely choose to, you're entering a community of practice. If you freely choose to play some sport or another, it pre-exists you. It exists before you. If you were never born, this community of practice would still be ongoing, right? So you're entering it. What does that mean? That means when you go into it, you've got to accept its practices. And there's a kind of contract going on here. There's a kind of contractual obligation upon you to duly respect and support the rules of the practice. You can't go into a game of football and start running with the ball under your arm. It's not football. It's something else like a rugby or something, right? So William Webb Ellis, who apocryphally picked up the ball and ran with it, invented a new game. And what did everybody say? He said, clear off, Ellis. We're trying to play football here. How can we play football if one person is using his hands all the time? Clear off. Because he's not duly respecting the rules of the practice. And he's not duly respecting the lawful authority of that practice. Right? So this is an important thing, you know. When you enter this thing, you presumably do so because you value it. You know, I don't value lacrosse. Don't ask me why. It's probably because I'm English and I had no practice of it when I was at school and so on. One of my best friends at university was England lacrosse international. I had no interest in it at all. I never picked a racket up. Do they call it a racket? But anyway, that thing they use, right? Doesn't matter, does it? Because lacrosse doesn't matter to me. I don't care. Right? I'm not going to go into it, and I don't owe anybody any duties. But if you come into football, which is mine, right? You better watch out, because it's ours, not yours. It's our community of practice. And presumably you're not going to come into it unless you think, hey, that looks a neat thing to do. And when you start doing it, you get good at it. You start valuing your skills, and you start valuing the opportunities that teams give you to contest your skills against other people, and you like this, and so you carry on doing it. Right. So, here we are now. We're engaging in a practice which has pre-existing rules that are independent from us. We freely go into it, and that's a kind of tacit contract. I'm coming in here, I will obey the rules. Now, if you start subverting those rules in one way or another, we'll come on to this in a minute. I'm thinking, just think doping for a minute anyway. If you want to subvert such a contract to contest by failing to obey some of its foundational rules, what do? Well, you threaten the moral basis of the sport. Think about gambling, if you like. I'm coming on to these things in a minute. Think about gambling. If you're a footballer, well, I think away from football, Carl Froch, the Sheffield boxer, admitted in the press this week, actually I think he admitted it in his autobiography, but I caught it on a news clip this week. He was fighting a championship fight, and members of his family had put money on the fight ending in the 5th round. Froch could have won the fight in the 4th round. And he says in his autobiography, I had to hold the bloke up so that he could get through the 4th round, and I knocked him out in the 5th. Now, he perverted the contest in order to win some money for his family. I can't remember whether he admits to putting a bet on himself. But it's a kind of insider trading, isn't it? It's a kind of insider knowledge. It's gambling cheating, because you're fixing the bet, right? But it's sport cheating as well, is it? It's sport cheating, in a way. And cricketers, spot fixing and throwing games and so on, threatens the moral basis of the whole sport. You know, when you're watching a game of cricket, are you watching a game of cricket or not? And this affects the way that people regard it. I'm living in the Czech Republic at the moment, and people won't go to watch football. There were big scandals about corruption in football 5, 6, 7 years ago. And many Czechs now just won't watch the team play football. And all the best Czechs are playing abroad now anyway. And a lot of people went abroad because the game collapsed in the Czech Republic. You'll also know, because of gambling problems, the Chinese Premier Football League has collapsed this season. No games being played anymore. Korean League has gone. The Turkish league's in turmoil, isn't it, with Fenerbahce and Besiktas and other teams they're going to be relegated, they've been fined millions and so on. You threaten the very moral basis of the sport if you fail to uphold the values and the rules of the sport. You jeopardise the integrity of the whole sporting community. How many athletes say, it's dreadful, you know. You win something and everybody says, I'll bet he's on drugs. You know, it's not just the druggies who get tarred with that brush. The integrity of the whole sporting community gets tarred with that brush. And it erodes public support and trust. The public want to see a contest, a proper contest. If they are not assured that there's a proper contest going on, your sport is in trouble. It will destroy your sport. And imagine the person who's doing this. The person who's doing this, gambling or behaving in a violent way or using violence to achieve sporting ends, or doping. Imagine who this person is, what he's trying to do. He's destroying the very thing that gives him a platform to do what he wants to do. He wouldn't be able to cheat at athletics unless there was athletics, right? So he's destroying the very thing that gives him a platform to do what he's doing now. And it's worse than that. He's destroying the very thing that he pretends to value. Because you're supposed to be valuing this thing because you want to do it and be good at it. This is self-defeating, self-contradictory behaviour. It's borderline psychotic. If you think what psychosis is, it's defined generally as attitudes which don't accord with reality. These people don't understand the reality that they're engaging with. So I think there's something deeply problematic about failing to acknowledge fair play in sport. And so what I want to do for the next 20 minutes is very quickly whiz through 5 issues. There are many more, of course, and you may well have your favourite one. But I'm going to whiz through 5 issues now, 5 ethical issues, and try and show the way in which each one of these is basically an issue in fair play and the contractor contest and equality before the rules, which I'm claiming is the very foundation, the logical foundation of sport. So first of all, doping. What's wrong with doping? Usual answers. They enhance performance, allow athletes to train harder, they're unnatural, they coerce others, they're harmful, they're illegal. I think all these are poor arguments against doping. Do they enhance performance? That's an empirical claim, it's a factual claim. What does science say about whether or not any dope enhances performance? Nothing. Because there can't be any experiments, can there? There can't be any scientific experiments about the effects of dope on Olympic athletes, can there? How many Olympic athletes are going to put their hands up and say, I'm taking dope, test me? There is no scientific evidence as to whether or not dope directly enhances performance. Coaches think it does. Athletes think it does. There's no evidence. But even if there is, what does it matter? Because that's what we're trying to do all the time, enhance our performance. The whole of sports science is about performance enhancement. The whole of coaching is about performance enhancement. The whole of my own personal training and personal preparation and dedication to my sport, it's all about enhancing my performance. We all want to enhance our performances all the time. So if doping's wrong, it can't be wrong because it enhances performance. That's what we're all trying to do. Okay, don't enhance performance, they allow athletes to train harder. Some people say you can train 4 or 5 sessions a day rather than 3 sessions a day if you're taking certain kinds of dope that allow your body to recover from exercise more quickly. Okay. Again, we've got the same problem. Do they or don't they? We don't know. There have actually been some experiments done on non-elite athletes, which seem to show that there is a performance-enhancing effect and that there is a train harder effect for these. But those studies are no good, are they? Because they're studies done on the non-elite athlete population. So you can't transfer results from the non-elite athlete population and say it must be true of the elite athlete population. Partly because the elite athletes are already up here and the non-elite athletes are already down here. And we don't know why they're down here. So the fact that they're enhanced by dope doesn't mean that these will be enhanced as well. Okay? So the scientific evidence is not there for us. But let's say it does enable athletes to train harder. In the Czech Republic, when I was giving the first of these lectures, it was minus 40 degrees in the mountains, minus 20 degrees in Prague. Everybody I know in the Czech Republic skis and skates. Everybody. Everybody's got skis and skates in the house. 4 or 5 pairs. They just walk out the door and skate. Anybody here skate? Anybody here ski? Anybody here ski in England? No, nobody skis in England. We have to go to Scotland to get the nearest place we can ski. Now, that's not very convenient, is it? People who can put skis on and nip outside and train a bit, they can train harder than you because they've got more time and it's easier for them to do it. Well, that's a terrible advantage for them, isn't it? Why don't they say at the Winter Olympics, oh, you're British, have the first 10 yards. Go on, have a little start, because you're British. No, they don't do that, do they? They don't care that some athletes can train harder than other athletes. It doesn't matter. If you live in America, you're guaranteed excellent facilities. If you live in Chad, or Somalia, or Eritrea, who cares about that? Nobody cares whether or not your social system allows you to train harder than another social system, harder or better than another social. Nobody cares about this. So that can't be why doping's wrong. Right, that can't be the reason. Drugs are unnatural. No, they're not. Half of them are and half of them aren't. Testosterone's natural. So some drugs are natural and some aren't. But that's true of medicines as well. Some of the medicines you take are natural substances and some of them, aspirin for example, are artificial, made in the lab. Who cares whether they're artificial or natural? I don't care whether my medicines are artificial or natural. I'm on 2 sets of pills at the minute, and I haven't a clue whether they're natural or not. Ask me if I care. I don't care whether they're natural or... Do they work, is what I want to know. So first of all, drugs aren't unnatural, and secondly, the natural-unnatural distinction doesn't help us here. It's useless. Fourth, they coerce other people to use them. If he's doing dope, I've got to do dope. My mum had this one sorted out when I was 7. Just because little Johnny does it, will you do it? If he puts his hand in the fire, will you put your hand in the fire? That was my mum's argument when I was 7, and I understood it. So can we understand the argument here? Just because he does dope, does it mean I've got to do dope? I remember when Chopper Harris was playing right back for Chelsea and only getting sent off infrequently instead of frequently, as he should have been. And let's say I'm a right back coming through. Chopper Harris is successful by using violence on the pitch. I better start using violence as well. Is that right? Of course not. Nobody thinks like that. So why should somebody think he's doing dope, so I've got to do dope? It's a silly argument. But anyway, nobody cares about coercion in sport. Sport is full of dreadful coercion. I see the Chinese divers have just done a clean sweep in the last week. They've won all the medals. How do they do that? I mean, it might be because there's a lot of them. You know, if you've got 1/6 of the world's population within your borders, you know, you've got a lot of people to choose from, and you're likely to do pretty well at these international competitions, aren't you? So it might just be statistical. You know, they've got a lot of people, so they're going to overwhelm a country like Luxembourg. You know, it's not a surprise that Luxembourg hasn't had a clean sweep of the gold medals. Not so surprising, but a clean sweep? How do they do that? Now, my answer is, I don't know. But here's a possible scenario, because this is true of their gymnastics, and I do know this. They take children away from their families aged 5, 6 or 7 after intensive talent identification procedures in schools. These children are then subjected to the kinds of training regimes and procedures and authoritarian control that would not be acceptable in England. Right? Now then, what are you going to do with your kids? You'll not win the diving medals and the gymnastics medals unless you do the same as that. So you're going to do it, are you? They're doing it, we've got to do it. Actually, we already do it. Take your swimmers. Swimmers are notoriously young maturers. Right, so you talent ID your swimmers at a pretty early age. So all the elite swimmers that I see in Leeds, where I used to be, they're doing 3 hours a day in the pool. 3 hours a day. But then they find out that somebody else, the competitors in Australia or America or somewhere, are doing 3.5 or 4 hours a day in the pool, and their coaches say to them, well, are you committed or not, Daniel? You know, if you're really serious about this, you know, you'll do 3.5 hours, mate. If you do 3 hours, you'll lose. Kids up and down the country are ploughing up and down the lanes, head in water, looking at a black line at the bottom of the pool, 3 hours, 3.5 hours a day. I call that sensory deprivation. You know, I call it child abuse. I'm probably wrong. Probably lots of kids who are loving it, you know. But it's borderline child abuse, and it certainly is child abuse if the kid's doing it because of pressure from his parents, or from pressure from his coach, or pressure from his teachers. He's got a bit of talent, and they want to live through him. And that happens. Where's the furore about it? I mean, occasionally people complain about it, but people just accept it. This is just normal practice if you want to be good. So if doping's wrong, it's not because they're coercive. Sport's coercive when you start getting to this elite level. And nobody cares about that. Dope's harmful? No, it isn't. No, it's not. Not if properly administered under medical supervision. Most dope difficulties are because it's illegal. It's a bit like social drugs. You know, one of the problems with social drug taking is that it's illegal, and so it gets taken under the wrong kinds of conditions. If you're rich and have good medical backup, you can control your heroin use, you can use it, and you can live a long life. Ask Keith Richards, right? Long-term heroin use. I mean, I know he's adult now, but you know, he looks as though he's had a life that's been full of drug taking. But the point is, sports dope is not that dangerous. Not many people die from it. Not as many people as die crossing the road, for example. And certainly not as many people who die from the legal substances of tobacco and alcohol. But where's the campaign against tobacco and alcohol? Where's the campaign against tobacco and alcohol, which is anything like the campaign against sports dope? They want to get international passports. They want to get people, well, they already have, got athletes on the whereabouts rule, where they have to say a year in advance where they're going to be, so that the doping police can arrive, knock on their door and require them to do a test on the spot. Your employer can't do that. It's against the law for your employer to do that to you, right? But the sports police can do it. This intrusive, almost fascist, you know, way of going about things. Now, why is that? It's certainly not because they're worried about the harm that's being caused to athletes through the dope. That's not why the dope police are there. They're not there because of the harm to athletes, because it's not really all that harmful. They're there because sport's important. So what's wrong with dope is not that it's harmful. In fact, more people die from taking part in sport every year than die from taking sports dope. So if you want to ban something that's harmful, ban sport, because people are going to die doing sport this year. All right, that's ever so sure. But there hasn't been a British person that we know of, I don't think, dying directly from sports dope since Tommy Simpson, many years ago. Okay, so it's not because it's harmful; it's because they're illegal. They're not. They're not. What's illegal is Class A, Class B, Class C drugs. They're illegal. Now, there's a second kind of illegality, which is prescription drugs illegality, which is they're not Class A, B or C drugs, but they're controlled drugs and you're not supposed to traffic in them unless you've got a doctor's prescription. And sports dope is largely in that category. But you and I both know you can get anything on the internet these days. Any prescription drug you can buy on the internet without a doctor's prescription. Right? So the idea that sports dope is wrong because it's illegal just doesn't hold. So I think these 6 arguments are really not very good. It's trying to invent something to claim that doping's wrong. Right? The first booklets that came out from the Sports Council in the 1970s had words like death, dying, you know, don't do this, you'll kill yourself, and so on. It was scare tactics. Doping is going to harm you, and so on. And of course, most athletes, well, all athletes who are taking drugs obviously don't believe that, do they, for a minute? So what is wrong with doping? Because it is wrong. It's dreadfully wrong. But not for any of those 6 reasons. It's wrong because it threatens the ethical basis of sport, period. It's very simple. It abrogates the pre-competition agreement. It abrogates the contract to contest. And remember we said, without the contract to contest, you can't have sport. Imagine this guy, you know, he comes up and he shakes your hand and he says, yes, I'll take the Olympic oath. I have prepared myself ethically. Yes, I will compete ethically. Yes, hello, mate. Smiles at you, looks at you in the eyes, and he's doing dope. That's not just a cheat, is it? It's not just a cheat. It's a person who's lying to you, lying in his teeth, right? And you can't play sport with people like that. That's my line on this. There's an interesting case, judgment to be decided on March the 12th, less than a fortnight's time, which is between the British Olympic Association and WADA, the World Anti-Doping Association. It's over. Colin Moynihan is standing firm on the BOA bylaw, which says anybody convicted of a serious doping offence, and I think that would be any serious ethical offence, will not represent Britain again and certainly won't take part in the Olympic Games. WADA has given in on LeSean Merritt and has said that despite the fact he's got a serious doping conviction, Nevertheless, he can participate in the London 2012 Games. Now, so you've got a London 2012 Games where a convicted dope cheat from America will be running. Will we choose Dwayne Chambers? And, there are other cases of British athletes who've served their time, they've done their ban, and now Britain won't pick them. The case before the Court of Arbitration for Sport is, will it uphold the BOA bylaw, which says we will not pick these people? Or will it reaffirm the decision made in the case of LaShaw Merritt and say you've got to pick them? Interesting one, isn't it? What's your line on this? Mine's dead simple. And if you take the handout from tonight's lecture from out there, I've got it as a little appendix at the end of it, a little argument which says this is why I'm with the BOA on this. Colin Moynihan's got it dead right on this one. These guys should be banned sine die, as we used to say. If you hit a referee in football, you're banned sine die. And quite right too. You can't smack referees about, that's just out of order. You'll never play football again. Quite right. If you dope, if you lie in your teeth to your mates and to your fellow competitors, you should never play again. Second issue, gambling. Let's distinguish two things: sport fraud and gambling fraud. Now, match fixing can be one of these or the other or both. So, for example, Besiktas' case looks like sport fraud. They had to win the last 18 games of the season last season to become champions for a record-breaking number of times. They won 18 games on the trot. Now, come on, right? How did they do that? Answer, they bribed everybody right, left and centre shamelessly. They'd been convicted of it and relegated, right? They wanted to participate in the, was it the UEFA Cup or, I can't remember whether it was the Champions League or whether it was the other, one of the European competitions they qualified for, and FIFA disqualified them from that competition, and they went to 3 appeals because they thought, it doesn't matter that we've bribed referees, other chairmen, players and everybody, we still should play football with you guys. I don't think so. They've got to serve a ban at least, haven't they? But that's just straight sport fraud, right? They're just trying to defraud the sporting contest and to come out with a result that otherwise perhaps they wouldn't have got. Laetitia, you know the Laetitia one where I haven't got time to explain the difference between spot fixing, spot betting, and spread fixing, spread betting. But this was a spread fix. The idea was, if we kick the ball out of play between the 40th and 70th seconds of the game, we win £30,000, right? Because they'd bet on the second when the ball would first go out of play. So Laetitia and 2 of his mates in the Southampton team fixed it, tried to fix it, so that the ball got kicked out in that period of time. Now, in his autobiography, Laetitia says, this is not really cheating at football. I'm just trying to cheat the bookies, and that's all right, isn't it? We all agree it's okay to cheat the bookie, right? That's what Laetitia says in his autobiography. This is just gambling fraud, where they set up the bookies to lose because of some kind of insider arrangement where a participant in the actual contest affects the outcome of the gambling contest. Okay. Same with Froch. This was gambling fraud. I want to say it's not just gambling fraud. There's also a risk of sport fraud here. I mean, it looks as though there's no relationship between booting the ball out in the first minute of the game and the eventual outcome. But games are won with a goal scored in the first minute. And what actually happened in this game was that Laetitia was unsuccessful. He tried to kick the ball into touch and failed. And those of his Southampton colleagues who weren't in on the act tried to keep the ball on the park. And because of the nature of spread betting, Laetitia nearly lost a fortune on this one. So he thought it was no danger that he wouldn't be able to kick the ball out. I think it's not true either that there's no danger that there couldn't have been a goal scored because of this. And so it's not simple gambling fraud. This is a sporting contest you're involved in. And if you're thinking about gambling outcomes and you're not thinking about the sport while you're thinking about the gambling outcomes, there's a danger, there's a risk of sport fraud as well. Nobbling a horse is a bit of both, isn't it? Nobbling a horse will produce sport fraud because the horse that should have won now can't win because he's got some stuff in his body. But that sport fraud, it achieves a gambling fraud, okay? So there are these two different things, but they come together in these interesting and different ways. There's another distinction we ought to attend to, which is the distinction between illegal gambling, irregular gambling, and unregulated gambling. In the literature and in the discussions with the International Olympic Committee and FIFA and so on, they talk about illegal and irregular gambling, illegal and irregular betting. This disguises the complicated world situation, global situation, in terms of gambling. The gambling problem largely occurs because of unregulated betting. That's to say, betting in certain countries where they don't have the gambling regulations that other countries have. So it's the lack of regulation of gambling that makes it dangerous for those countries that do have regulation. But that's not illegal. It's not illegal gambling because there's no regulation of it. So there's a difference between illegal gambling and unregulated gambling. And the literature doesn't mention the word unregulated anywhere. So there's this big confusion here, I think, in identifying what the problem is. The problem with irregular gambling is not related to gambling gains in a global sense. Irregular betting is when you can spot that far too much money is being bet on a particular outcome and you think there's a fix. So there are these big systems in place now which try to look for irregular patterns of betting because that's an indication that there might be something dodgy going on there. Okay? Now, why does this matter? Well, this is why I think it matters. Nobody in sport that I can find over the past 2 years, look for it yourself, nobody said there's anything at all wrong with gambling. Now, when I were a boy, my dad used to have a little bet on the horses, but my mum didn't like it. She didn't like it. And she complained about it from time to time because she thought gambling was immoral. Gambling itself is immoral. That's what my mum thought. Now, I don't think that. My dad didn't think that. You may not think that. But the point, some people think that. That is a view that it's possible to take on gambling. You can't find that view represented in the sporting community. There's something wrong with gambling. It produces social problems, right? Since the advent of the internet and spot gambling, which is you can bet on anything that happens in the game. If you watch a game of football now, you'll get some film star comes on at half-time, and he'll try and encourage you to have a bet on who scores the next goal or who gets sent off or who gets the next yellow card or, trivial events in the game. People are millions and millions are being bet on these aspects of the game. So gambling has become a huge part of sport. It always was, by the way. I mean, cricket, the emergence of cricket in the 17th and 18th centuries was heavily related to the growth of the gambling industry. Boxing, the same's true. Race horsing wouldn't exist without the gambling, and so on. So gambling and sport have always been closely tied together, and it's very risky. Nowadays, they're so closely intertwined that there's no prizing them apart. Why are sports authorities against unregulated betting? Because they can't profit from it. What the sports authorities want to do is to get regulated betting that they've got a piece of the action in. So now you have this terrible sport gambling symbiosis. The biggest sponsor and supporter of sport in the world now is not television, with the increase of TV rights for the World Cup and the Olympics and so on. It was always TV that was motoring the growth of sport, the development of sport and so on, the investment in sport. Now it's gambling. Gambling is now the biggest investor in sport, the biggest sponsor of sport and so on. You'll see football teams, snooker players, darts players, they've all got some gambling logo on their shirt. So I think that there's a bit of a perversion going on here. I think what's happening here is that sport so much sees itself as profiting from gambling that it blinds itself to the possible problems of gambling. And these problems are twofold. One, the general immorality question, which brings social ills. You know, is this an immoral thing which brings social difficulty? Somebody else has to clean up after problem gamblers. And it's not the gambling industry that pays for that, and it's not sport that pays for that. It's everybody through taxation pays for that. Okay, so that's one big problem. The other problem is it's the gambling industry that's at the back of sports fraud and sport corruption. It's only because it's possible to have this sort of gambling on sport that young players are willing to gamble the rest of their career on selling their souls and selling their teams out. Now, I think we ought to have much better regulation of the sports gambling business. For a start, I would stop spot fixing, spot betting. I'd stop that straight away. And you can do it. Some sports have done it. Football doesn't want to do it because it's so hugely profitable to football. But it's the thing that's going to kill football if you're not careful. So, here's one paradox that you get with gambling. What's cheating? Cheating is usually defined something like rule breaking to gain an advantage. You can't hold in football. You know, there are 11 offences for which a direct free kick can be given. Holding is one of them. So if I've got somebody's shirt like this in football, and I'm holding, what am I doing? I'm breaking the rule. Why? To gain an advantage. You can't run past me now, mate. Or I can get in front of you now, mate. I'm rule breaking for contest advantage. So a sports cheat cheats to win. That's the only reason a sports cheat has got to cheat is to win. You're not going to cheat to lose, are you? It just doesn't make sense. So, is it cheating? Should we also call it cheating if it's done for betting gain? Well, I've said kind of yes, because it's the potential to affect the outcome. Some people say it's kind of cheating what Letitia did, even though it didn't in fact affect the outcome, because it might have affected the outcome. But my final view is no, it's not to be counted as cheating, because what Letitia is doing there is not cheating at football. Right? If cheating is seeking a football advantage, Letitia is not seeking a football advantage by what he's doing. He's cheating at gambling. It's gambling fraud, not sport fraud, that Letitia is engaged in. So cheating to lose, which is throwing a game, right? If I throw a game, I make my own team lose so that I get a gambling gain. Cheating to lose is only possible because in gambling, you can win one thing, your bet, by losing another thing, the game. Amateurism. Not really got time to look at amateurism, but the simple thing is this, really. This is the simple thing. Anglo-American amateur sport was a class-based conspiracy. It was to keep people who worked on the River Thames from competing in the Henley Regatta. You know, you couldn't have gentlemen getting beaten by rivermen, could you? Right? So we won't let them play. 1861, the 3As, when the 3As was formed, they destroyed the records of pre-AAAs racers. Why? Because actually the gentlemen were very good. So when they started setting their records, they wanted their records to be their records, the amateur records, not these other people who ran for a living and made a living out of running and so on. We can't be compared with them. It was a working class conspiracy. That wasn't what de Coubertin thought amateurism should be. And that's why the legacy of amateurism and anti-professional sport under Avery Brundage and so on distorts de Coubertin's perception. What de Coubertin meant by amateurism was, watch out if you've got extrinsic goals. If you want to make money, or if you want to become famous, or if you want to get your country at the top of the medals table, there's a danger there. There's a danger that it might pervert your ethical commitment to engagement in sport. You're likely to do naughty things if your real motivation is extrinsic to the sport. That's all de Coubertin was trying to say. And it's true, isn't it? It's true. If you've got an extrinsic motivation, it motivates you to cheat or to do something wrong because you want to win, because you want the other prize, you want the cup, you know, you want the money, you want the fame, and so on. So de Coubertin was saying, if you have intrinsic aims, you're obviously going to reject questionable means, aren't you? You know, you're going to say, I'm just interested in a good game, mate. You know, I'm just interested in having a good game. And I used to love playing against people who were better than me. I'm a hopeless squash player. Everybody was better than me at squash anyway. But it was great playing against people who were just that bit better than you. Because how else are you going to improve except by getting beaten by people who are better than you? I used to love it. I used to learn so much from it. And used to improve my game so much. And that's what I was in it for, have a good game. And every now and again, I'd come across somebody who wasn't quite as good as me. And I'd get a win. And you'd have a good game against somebody like that because you can express yourself and so on in ways you can't against people who are a bit better than you. That's what we're in it for. I didn't play squash for any extrinsic reason. I played it because I was interested in it. And you can't have a proper game of squash if you use questionable means. If I'm cheating all the time I'm playing, I'm not really playing and I'm not getting out of it what I say I want out of it. I'm contradicting myself. Fair or temple, that's de Coubertin. Violence. Distinction between aggression and violence. People get this wrong all the time, I believe. Aggression is taking forceful means to your ends. Violence, though, is intending to harm. So aggression and violence are totally different things. If you make this distinction clearly, you read any sports psychology textbook, it gets this wrong. Because they all talk about Konrad Lorenz. Who hadn't a clue about the relationship between aggression and violence. You have to distinguish between these two because then it just reflects what's in the rules. What's in the rules of rugby? You can be as aggressive as you like. What a great game last weekend between Wales and England. Just the sheer brutality of it, right? It looks really violent, doesn't it, eh? No? But the point about it is, you can be as aggressive as you like in rugby, no problem at all. But if you try and hurt somebody, you're off. In football, you can't do this. For a long time, it was tolerated in the English game. But now we're getting to grips with it, along with the rest of the world. We're joining the rest of the world, right? And if you show your studs against somebody's leg like this, when he's trying to kick the ball, you're off. Why? Because that has to be interpreted as either the intention to harm the player or willing to risk harm to the other player just to get your foot on the ball. You're off. And so you should be, because that's violence, not aggression. You can tackle as hard as you like. There is no rule in football that says, oh, please don't tackle him too hard. It doesn't say that. You can tackle as hard as you like, so long as the referee doesn't construe your hardness as the intention not to win the ball but to hurt the man. As soon as the referee thinks you're intending to hurt the man, you're off. And that's how it should be. Now, the point is this, the point of this, it seems to me, is that this is exactly what fair play requires. Fair play requires attention to respect for the other person. He's your co-competitor. He's the cooperator who makes your game possible. You owe him respect. And the best way to show respect is non-harm. Final one, deception. People say, look, how can sport be morally educative when we teach children to deceive? You know, throwing a dummy, fainting and so on. That's deception, isn't it? Eh? So how can it be morally educative when we're teaching people to see deception as just good tactics, right? Because deception is part of cheating, isn't it? I mean, lying is not just telling untruths. It's telling untruths with the intention to deceive. That's what a lie is. It's the same with cheating. Cheating is not just rule breaking. You break rules all the time. You know, you go offside. That's not cheating. Cheating is not just rule breaking. Cheating is rule breaking with the intention to deceive. You're trying to get away with it. I've got his shirt, but the referee won't notice, right? So cheating involves the intention to deceive, and that's a bad thing, but we're teaching people to deceive, fainting and dummying. No, that's totally wrong. You read this time and again, writers making this point time and again, and it's just a silly point, because you have to distinguish between two different kinds of deception. The first kind of deception is strategic deception, which is like throwing a dummy and so on. That's within the rules, but not only within the rules, it's part of the constitutive skills of the sport. What would tennis be like if you couldn't do a deceptive little drop shot? Right? It's part of the skill of the sport. The rules call that skill into being. So it's within the rules and it's a constitutive skill of the sport. Definitional deception, though, goes against the rules. The rules define the game. And definitional deception is when you break the definition of the game. Football, you can't play with your hands. As soon as you play with your hands and try and get away with it, that's definitional deception. It's wrong. Why is it wrong? It's because it's against the rules. It's very simple. It's against the rules. Strategic deception is not against the rules. So again, we have an example of what seems to be a terrible ethical dilemma here, and it's not. It's just all based in the idea of fair play. If you understand the idea of fair play as the logic of sport, then you see that fair play is also the basis of the ethics of sport. And you just have to look at these foundational elements to see what's the right thing to do and what's not. Thank you very much.
For more information, please visit www.gresham.ac.uk.